So this is basically our goal for 1-1 is to be able to identify if it's a point, line, plane, ray, segment, lots of vocabulary there, naming them, drawing them, and then apply some postulates, some basic facts that we're going to learn about them. Again, I'm not going to keep listing the vocab every time on your notes. Our first word that we're going to define today is undefined terms, which is kind of weird to define undefined terms. But there's 3 words in geometry that you cannot define using other shapes. So we say something is an undefined term if you can't define it by using other figures. And our 3 words are point, line, and plane. Those 3 are undefined terms in geometry. I say they're undefined, but we are going to give them a definition. It's just that we can't use other figures to do it. A point they told you in the video is basically just a dot that you are going to use and name with a capital letter. I'll be super picky that you're using a capital letter when you do that. Will you take your hoodie down for me? Thank you. I appreciate it. A capital letter, super important. Don't use lowercase letters to name your points. Anybody know how many dimensions there are in a point? So 1 dimension was something else. What has 1 dimension? Okay, so going up and down. So what did they call that in the video if it has 1 dimension? City and Faith? A line. So a point technically has no dimension. But if it really had no dimension, we wouldn't be able to see it, right? It would be microscopic if it had no dimension, which it technically is. But for us to actually see the point, we have to draw it with some thickness, okay? But theoretically, it has no thickness. That's why on a number line, you have a point at 0, and then you have a point right next to it, which is at 0.000000001, right? So you can have infinitely tiny little points. They have no dimension. Name them with a capital letter. So we just said a line has 1 dimension, and it goes on forever in both directions, right? When you name a line, the video said you can name it with 2 points. So you can name this line XY, or the order doesn't matter. You can name it line YX. You're going to put a line above it. Naming these is the most important thing. Make sure you're doing it correctly. If there's more points on your line, you can just pick any 2. You don't need to list them all. You should not list them all. So if they add more points, just pick 2. You could name this line ZY. Is everybody clear there? The way he didn't talk about in the video is this way right here. Sometimes your line's going to have a little cursive lowercase letter out to the side. That is not a point on your line. Biggest mistake I'll see, our students will write that the name of this line is ZL and put a line above it. L is not a point. It's not a capital letter. You can name a line using that cursive letter out to the side. You just write line L. Okay? So if there's a cursive letter out to the side, write the word line and use that cursive letter. Planes. He said that a plane, oops, if you'll make sure it's okay. Make sure your phone's off or on silent if that's you, whoever that was. Planes, he said, is how many dimensions? 2 dimensions. Oops, can't spell dimension. 2 dimensions. It goes in 2 directions. So left, right, up, down makes a flat surface. What were some examples of planes he talked about? Smartboard's a plane. Paper's a plane. Table, desktop is a plane. The ceiling, the floor, anything that's a flat surface is considered a plane. The hard thing is that when we think about a table, it has a beginning and an end. Planes go on forever. When you're answering questions, you're going to have to remind yourself that your textbook has to stop, but that the plane goes on forever. So you have to imagine, could it happen if it went on forever? It has no thickness, even though the only way we could see it is if it had some thickness. That's why our paper has a little thickness. To name a plane, you need 3 points. You always have to have 3 points and only 3 points. If you have a quadrilateral and you're talking about this plane here and it's got points on every vertex, that's great, but you're just going to pick 3 of them to name your plane. Don't list all 4. How many points are in a plane? Infinitely many. How many points are on a line? Infinitely many. It's just that they may choose to label them and give them a name. You don't want to have to list every single letter to infinity, so you just pick 3 for a plane, 2 for a line. Okay? You have to have 3 for a plane, and here's why. If I have a point here A and a point here B, and I say, go draw a picture of a person on plane AB, do you know what plane I'm referring to if there's only 2 letters? You may say, yeah, the whiteboard. But is there a plane that could go through A and B this way? So it's kind of like that corner point up there could be point B. This corner point over here could be point A. Which 2 planes intersect at points A and B in this room? The ceiling and the floor doesn't actually intersect there. The ceiling touches what at points A and B? The wall up here, right? This wall and the ceiling are going to intersect at this whole line. And so those points, so if I just say AB, you don't know if I'm talking about the ceiling or if I'm talking about this wall. You need a 3rd point. If that 3rd point is on the board, then I'm talking about this whiteboard. But if that 3rd point C was out here, then I would be talking about this plane. Does that make sense? Okay. Once you have 3 points, that defines your plane. You have to have 3 points. Here's the other thing that's really important. Those 3 points can't be in a straight line. Look what happens if I say, okay, I have 3 points. Now go draw a picture on plane ABC. We still have the same problem. It could be the board, or it could be this plane that's going through ABC. So one of your points has to be off of the line so that you know which plane you're talking about. Okay, so when you name a plane, you're going to use 3 points, and you're going to put the word plane in front of it. Or, he did not talk about this in the video, a second way you can name a plane is kind of like how you can name a line, in that sometimes they're going to put a cursive capital letter in a corner of the plane. If they do, you could write it a little shorter by just putting plain R. Do you see a difference between these letters and R? Okay, A, B, and C are actual points in the plane. R is not a point in the plane. It's just a way that you could use to name your plane. Okay? Any questions? The next 2 vocabulary words are collinear and coplanar. When you see the word collinear, what does co mean? Together. What other word do you see in the word collinear? Linear or line. So when you see collinear, that means together on the same line. Collinear are points that lie on the same line. Okay, so if you look at the picture on the board, what are 2 points that are collinear? K and M. What else? L and M. What about K and N? Are they collinear? They could be, and that's the hard part. You've got to get in your mindset, could it exist? Even if it's not drawn. Could there be a line that goes through K and N? Yes, so that means K and N are collinear because there is a line that would go through K and N. Are K, L, and N collinear? Can you draw a line, one line that would go through K, L, and N?
If you flipped it 90 degrees, if you flipped that plane onto another plane, then it would be on one line.
If I flipped
That up.
this right here up, okay, they would be on the same plane, but would they be on the same line? So collinear means on the same line. So if I put my pencil on point K, and then here's point L and point N, is it possible to take your pencil and draw a line that goes through L, but also would be going through N? No. So sometimes they can be collinear, sometimes they're not. What do you notice about any 2 points, though? Here's A, here's C. Are they collinear? Every 2 points are going to be collinear. Even if the line's not drawn, they're collinear. You can draw a line through them. So every 2 points are collinear. It's the 3rd point that may or may not be on that line. Okay, that's why a third point determines your plane. That's our next word, coplanar. So co together, plane means that they're going to be points on the same plane. So now look at the picture on the board. Are K, L, M, and N on the same plane? Yes, they are on the smartboard. The smartboard's a flat surface. They are coplanar. It's when you get that third dimension that will determine whether or not they're in the same plane. So for example, I have A, B, C. If I have a point D out here, would A, B, C, and D all be on the same plane?
If the plane went this way.
But could it get point B at the same time? So that's what you're asking. Can you make a plane that would go through those 3 points and this fourth point at the same time? No. So if D had been somewhere over here, then yes, they would be coplanar because they can all be drawn on the board. Okay? So 3 points, any 3 points are always going to be coplanar. Pick 2, pick a third, that determines your plane. But it's when you throw in that fourth point that it may or may not be. If they're not coplanar, they say non-coplanar. All right, you and your partner, see if you can answer these 2 questions. Yeah, all of this is in your notes, so you can flip through your notes, find the problem, write it down. Be careful on part B. Remember in the video there's a difference between a line and a what? Line segment. Part B says to name 3 lines. Make sure you're naming them lines and that you're naming them correctly. Part A is just asking you to name 4 points. 4 points that are coplanar. Okay, I'm going to pull you back just for time purposes. Let's see how you're doing. What are the 4 points in this picture that are all on the same plane? A, B, C, D. Notice this is 3-dimensional here. Point E is up here at the point on the pyramid. If you were to pick B, C, and E and try to name a 4th point, you can't do that because that's this side of the pyramid. There's no way to connect it to another point down here. When you name points, do not put them side by side without separating them with commas, because it's going to mean something different later if you have 4 letters side by side with no commas. Okay? So if you're naming points, put commas in between. A, B, C, D. All right, give me a name of a line. What's one line in our picture? AE. Make sure when you name it that you're putting a line above it with arrows on the ends, just like in the video. What's another line? B. Be careful. BC would be what? Line segment. What's another option? DE would be a line. And another one? I'm sorry, say it again. CE. Okay, so you're looking for the things that have arrows at the ends going on forever. If they had said name a line segment, then we could have named things like AB, BC, CD, AD. Okay? Questions on how to name lines? All right. Any questions so far on anything? Okay, your picture is a little hard to read. Go ahead and look at my picture up here, and we'll just do this together real quick because we're about out of time. What is one plane in this picture named correctly? How do we name a plane? Plane R? What's another way to name the same plane R instead of calling it plane R?
KLM.
Okay, but what do you have to put in front of KLM? Plane. So plane, KLM, because once again, it's going to mean something different later if you just have 3 letters side by side. What's another plane in the picture besides that yellow plane? Plane ABC. And just like in the video, even though it looks like a triangle, you have to remember that it can go on forever. Okay? We are obviously not going to finish all of section 1, so here's the deal. I'm going to give you your first homework assignment. It is not going to be due on Friday. What is due on Friday? Arithmetic proficiency, but here's my advice. Hold on just a second, guys. Okay, here's my advice, guys. I would go ahead and do as much of this as you can because you're going to get a second assignment on Friday, and you don't want to go home and have all of it to do all at once, okay? Core Math, what book is the Core Math book? The workbook. You can rip out the page. So notice one page is the Core Math page, and then the other page is out of the textbook. Please do the textbook on a separate sheet of paper. All right, you guys, have an amazing day. Call or text me if you need help, or come in the morning.